So first, I want to second the thanks to Ron for all the work that he's done on this issue, and you're really an inspiration, I think, to us all in your commitment and just consistent work throughout your career on trying to end the death penalty and bring fairness. I can really speak best about the work that they've done with me, so I have one case, Rodney Reed, that a team of primarily lawyers in the Wilmington, Delaware office are working on, and they started working with me in 2012. And as we do it, we say, oh, it's just a Fifth Circuit brief, and they were great. They helped write the brief and prepped the argument and came out, and it was a fun time in New Orleans. But we didn't win, and then we had them hooked. And so several years later, we had some state litigation, ultimately got a stay of execution, did a week-long hearing in Bastrop County, Texas, and I knew I definitely had the goods with me when Michelle Davis, who is a lawyer in Texas, showed up in her extra-sized pickup truck. So we knew we had the help, and as a death penalty practitioner and lawyer with the Innocence Project, it is just incalculable to have the kind of support that a firm like Skadden can provide, and just the ability to know that you're not in it alone, and that you can have these kind of resources and the incredible intellect and commitment and just energy is really amazing, and it allows us to multiply the work that we do at the Innocence Project and on individual cases tenfold. And for that, this is amazing, and certainly one reason to get the Exceptional Service Award. And I just want to give one anecdote. We had a case, and Emily talked about how not every case results in the outcome that we want. And for many years, a group at the New York office of Skadden had been working on Larry Swearingen's case. And Larry was a person who was convicted, I think, in 1999. He had a lot of facts against him that were very difficult, but always claimed that he was innocent. And it was very difficult. We got involved in 2012, got 2 different stays of execution for Larry in the last 7 years. But unfortunately, ultimately he was executed last month. And the work that Stacey Cohen and Andrew Gish and others at the New York office did on that case was just phenomenal, and something that I just remember we were doing a cert petition on the day of the execution, and the brief in opposition was filed, and we had to do a reply brief in roughly 2 hours. And Stacey Cohen, the litigator in New York, was somewhat flummoxed, and she's like, this is not usually how things work at Skadden. But nonetheless, she produced, the whole team produced incredible work. And although we did not get the results that we had wanted, Larry knew that he had folks who had his back, and that every issue that was important was raised, and people knew about it. And that is the ability to bring to light these miscarriages of justice, and to make the death penalty not a routine aspect of the criminal justice system is so important. And it is the kind of work that we see every day with Skadden and firms like it. So I'm very pleased to present this Extraordinary Service Award to Skadden and appreciate all the work that lawyers around the country do on these cases.
Thank you, Bryce, for that wonderful introduction. I have had a chance to work with Bryce on a non-death case for the last 6 years or so, and on an innocence case in Maryland, and I know what a great lawyer you are. It's been great to fight the fight in Easton, Maryland, and the Maryland Court of Special Appeals, and now the Court of Appeals. So thank you for that, and of course, thank you to the ABA for this really wonderful honor. I also want to congratulate all the folks at White and Case for the award you're receiving. I had a chance to look at the information about the work that you've done, which is really impressive. And I also want to congratulate Kelly Henry at the Tennessee Capitol Habeas Unit on receiving the John Paul Stevens Guiding Hand of Counsel Award. I was a public defender for almost 15 years in Maryland. I was not a full-time capital lawyer. In fact, I only did capital work rarely. But I know what it's like to be a full-time public defender. But to do that kind of work on capital cases day in and day out is just incredible work. It's grueling, it's complex, it's exhausting, and it's terrific that the best of the best lawyers answer that call, because it's so important. So I'm here tonight really on behalf of hundreds of lawyers and staff at Skadden who have represented 6 death row inmates across the country, mostly in Texas, in recent years, and who also have participated in filing amicus briefs and doing other advocacy work. So I'm accepting this award really on behalf of all of the Skadden lawyers and staff who've poured their hearts into these cases, who've provided client-centered representation, and have done everything they can to represent our clients and the cause as best as possible. It's been a full, firm, full throttle effort over many years. But as Bryce says, it's also a bittersweet moment for us because, as Bryce mentioned in the Larry Swearingen case, we lost a client just a month or so ago. And while I wasn't part of that team, the darkness that I felt as that execution was approaching and occurred was really hard, and I just can't imagine what it was like for our client, for his family, for the lawyers on our team, to know that a man with compelling claims of innocence was killed by the state of Texas. But anyway, before I introduce Cliff Sloan, who's going to talk briefly, I want to say something about my colleague and friend, Ron Tabak. Ron, it has been just a pleasure and continues to be a pleasure and honor to work with you. You are an amazing colleague. You are so smart, so passionate, so dedicated, and so effective at what you do. You're an inspiration to me and to everyone at the firm, and I'm just so grateful that I have had the chance to work with you. For those of you who know about Ron's role in the death penalty but don't know so much about Ron's role at Skadden, Ron is really the architect of the pro bono program at Skadden. He's the heart and soul of our pro bono program, and I have no qualms in saying that it's an impressive pro bono program. Ron's decades of death penalty work, the work for which you so richly deserve the Special Project Leadership Award, is just a fraction of what you've contributed on the pro bono front at Skadden. And many of my colleagues have written or told me how critical your work is, Ron. Eric Friedman, our executive partner in New York, who wasn't able to be here tonight because he's traveling in Europe, wrote me an email in which he said, and Ron, you were copied on this, Ron, thank you for your tireless dedication to this important cause. You bring great pride to the firm. So congratulations, Ron. So now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Cliff Sloan, who's a recently retired partner at Skadden and the leader of the Bobby Moore team, which was a happier result, although Bobby still is in solitary confinement in Texas, waiting for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals to do what the Supreme Court has told it has to do and take Bobby off of death row. So Cliff,
Thank you very much. And I want to say that it is especially meaningful for us to receive this recognition from the ABA, because the ABA has been such a leader and supporter in the Bobby Moore case and on the very important issues that the Bobby Moore case represents. And I do want to say a word about the Bobby Moore case. It vividly illustrates both the injustice and obstacles in death penalty litigation and the death penalty itself. And at the same time, it vividly illustrates the possibility of hard-won progress from years of effort by many committed and dedicated individuals, lawyers, and organizations such as the ABA. The Bobby Moore case, as you know, is about the standards for intellectual disability in capital cases and about implementing the Supreme Court decision in Adkins versus Virginia that no person with intellectual disability can be executed. And in 2004, in the notorious Bryce case, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals held, among other things, that in Texas, nobody could get the benefit or the protection of the Adkins decision unless he or she established that he or she was like the fictional character Lenny in John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. And it set forth the Bryce factors which had to be satisfied to make that showing, a holding that clearly conflicted dramatically with clinical understanding, with medical understanding, with common sense. And it was challenged many times over the years to no avail. The Supreme Court repeatedly denied cert, the federal courts denied relief, the Texas court refused to reconsider it. And then finally, toward the end of 2015, the Supreme Court granted the cert petition in our case. And in March of 2017, on a 5-3 vote, the Supreme Court found for Bobby Moore, and unanimously, all 8 justices who were participating said that the Bryce factors were unconstitutional. And they remanded to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And 15 months later, in June of 2018, the Texas court decided that despite the evidence of Bobby Moore's intellectual disability that the Supreme Court had emphasized, and despite the principles about intellectual disability in capital cases that the Supreme Court had explicated, and despite the fact that the prosecutor, the Harris County DA, now agreed with us that Bobby Moore was intellectually disabled and could not be executed, despite all of that, the Texas court said, well, we still find that he is not intellectually disabled and he must be executed. So we went back to the Supreme Court and asked for a summary reversal on the ground that it was inconsistent with the Supreme Court's opinion. And in February of this year, 7 months ago, the Supreme Court did exactly that. It summarily reversed and took the extraordinary step of saying, we find on this record that Bobby Moore is intellectually disabled. And it again sent it back to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And as Don mentioned, that's where it sits. The Texas court has not taken action at this point. And as Don also mentioned, Bobby Moore remains in solitary confinement like every inmate on death row in Texas, despite the fact that it is well established that for an individual with intellectual disability, solitary confinement is especially cruel and excruciating. Now, I do want to say a word again about the ABA's contributions. And again, we are very grateful to all of the individuals, lawyers, and organizations who contributed so much to the progress on this general issue with regard to Texas's standard and with regard to the standard for intellectual disability generally. But the ABA played a very important role. And let me just mention a few things. In 2013, the ABA issued a study of the death penalty in Texas, as it did in other states, drawing on prominent attorneys of varying backgrounds throughout the state, looking at the death penalty in depth, and it had a very important section on the Briseno factors and the horrific ways that they were being applied in courts throughout Texas. And in the first Moore Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court cited and relied on that 2013 study from the ABA. The ABA also filed very important and compelling amicus briefs at both times that the Bobby Moore case was before the Supreme Court. And I will tell you that in the oral argument in the Bobby Moore case, at one point the Solicitor General of Texas was taking issue with the way that we described how the Briseno factors played out in courts throughout Texas. And I said to the justices, please read the amicus brief from the ABA because it sets forth clearly and in detail exactly how the Briseno factors are playing out in courts throughout Texas. And I am certain that it played a very important role in the outcome of the case. So I'm very grateful to the ABA, to all of those who have worked on this issue over the years. And finally, I just want to say that I also am very grateful to Ron for his leadership and his mentorship. And Ron was the person who got me involved in the Bobby Moore case in 2015 at the cert petition stage. And I will forever be grateful for that and for so much else. So thank you very much.